We've got our next panel, the growth loop, and we've got ironSource and Random Logic Games here on stage. So I'll let Andrew and Yevgeny take it away.
Hi guys, hope you enjoyed lunch. I'm here with Andrew, going to be talking about what we call the growth loop, trying to connect the dots of measurement of ad revenue behavior for users and turning this into actionable insights on the user acquisition side. My role within ironSource is the VP of Growth. I basically oversee a team of growth analysts that focus on implementing the best strategies around user acquisition, ad monetization, helping with methodologies and tools, and kind of translating that into our product strategy, and I also lead our partnerships with the likes of Kochava.
Yes, and as Yevgeny said, my name is Andrew Stone. I'm the co-founder of Random Logic Games. We're of course a big fan of Kochava and also an ironSource customer, and I think the presentation we have for you is going to be really interesting. Whether you monetize with ads or not, you're definitely affected by the whole ad ecosystem. So,
cool. So a word about ironSource, to those of you that are not familiar. Basically what we're trying to build is a growth engine for apps, trying to tackle anything around growth, which basically focuses on scaling up through performance marketing and having maximizing LTV of those users. Our platform today reaches, this is from last weekend, 365 million daily active users. So this is our technology, our SDK, integrated into apps that show ads, basically. These are some of the bigger names that we work with, obviously Random Logic as well, that you guys are familiar with. The biggest name has its own couple of slides. And what the platform that these guys are using, basically, this is our flagship product, is our ad mediation. To those of you that are not familiar, ad mediation basically is a platform that is integrated into those apps, where the idea here is that every time a user is engaging with an ad, it's a rewarded ad and they're opting into engagement, or if it's a system-initiated ad like a banner or interstitial, we mediate that layer of different demand sources, where our goal here is to serve the best possible demand source to that user based on either a programmatic optimization or a waterfall configuration, where the app itself defines who he wants to show to which kind of users based on segmentations and different type of configuration. The growth loop that we're going to be discussing here is kind of a framework that we have internally that helps us identify the bottlenecks within the life cycle of an app in terms of growth. What should be optimized? Where is the real bottleneck that stops this app from becoming a bigger business? And the way it looks like basically is that we take over once the app is live, and if you have a game scenario, basically once it's ready, the idea here is that you start bringing users inside the game, whether it's paid user acquisition or organic users. This is kind of acquiring users from the market into the game. Once they're in the game, you're switching to step 2, which is basically the goal is to monetize those users, whether it's through in-app purchases, subscriptions, ads, in case you monetize with ads. And this is kind of where you gather enough data for you to be able to analyze and optimize that behavior, where the goal is to maximize LTV. So everything on the dotted line is what's happening inside the game. Everything that is on top is what's happening with the market that is outside of the game, and how do you bring users in. Basically, after you measure that part of how users behave, and you also have measurement in place on where did those users come from, using attribution platforms, basically what you are able is to close that loop and be able to make the right decisions theoretically in order to start accelerating that loop. So if you start with 1,000 users, you monetize them to a certain extent, you measure that, you try to optimize that for the next couple of users that are going to be coming in, and then you need to take the right actions to invest better in profitable and efficient user acquisition. Again, kind of simplifying the problem. The user acquisitions team's role is to maximize profit by scaling up the operation profitably, bidding on the right sources, running the right creatives, using the right tools and methodologies to do that the best way possible, and then it's the role of the product itself to monetize those users the best as possible. And if you're doing a good job, basically you're able to maximize that and keep accelerating this as a learning experience. One of the key elements here within step 3 and 4 is measurement. You cannot analyze much and definitely not optimize if you don't have measurement in place. And today, basically with how things work, within your game there's the attribution platforms SDK that basically report all the in-app events, all the in-app purchases to the attribution platforms, connecting the dots to where those users came from, how much revenue those users generated, how did they engage with the app. That data is either consumed through the platform or in some cases a custom BI stack that some teams have in place, where the idea is to provide the right actionable insights to the UA team for them to make the right decisions and basically implement the right optimization actions on each user acquisition or retargeting platform. This kind of this average scenario covers what we know today. When it comes to ad monetization, out of curiosity, how many of you guys here monetize your apps with ads? Like 9 guys? Perfect. No, that's great. How many of you are running user acquisition for your apps? Or someone else is running user acquisition for your apps? Or you're not listening? Cool. So this is where it's kind of important, because the idea here is that most of you are not monetizing with ads, which is fine, though you are acquiring users from other apps that do monetize with ads. And what we're talking about here today is how are these apps or games operate to make their business grow. If they don't do that well, you cannot acquire from those channels, right? So if someone figures things out and they're growing, it's great for you if that's a good source for you. And in this case, there's a big missing part in terms of user behavior, and that's ad revenues. And there's the mediation platforms, basically the monetization solutions that have visibility into the user level in-app ad engagement, and that usually is kind of aggregated to your daily monetization reports. So you log in, you know that yesterday you generated $1,000 in the US. And that's kind of where you are standing. You have this user level data on the in-app purchase perspective, and it's a challenge on the ad monetization. So what do you do with those $1,000? You don't know where did those users come from, how much each generated, and what would be your next steps. What that actually means today is that there's a big gap between IP and ads. The biggest is whether it's user level or not. And if you only have access to aggregated data, what can you do with it? Think about if tomorrow, like, it's not no more available, no more possible to have access to user level in-app purchases. So all you have is a line item in Google's Developers Console or iTunes Connect. You generated $10,000 from in-app purchases yesterday, but where did that come from? And how do you really make that actionable? How do you connect the dots and make it actionable on the attribution platform, which is the tool that all of us are using for making decisions and measurement? Today, what user acquisition looks like for ad-based apps, basically everything that is listed is kind of what's happening. It's divided to different type of behaviors. One of the biggest gaps is return on ad spend. You cannot run a return on ad spend campaign for an ad-based game because you don't know the return. You know the ad spend, but you don't know the real return of the users that you acquire from a single source. So you kind of fall back to retention, where most of these apps try to connect retention behavior, a certain retention curve with what it looks like on the LTV side, and try to optimize towards retention. And it's a pretty big challenge because you cannot control retention. Unlike ROAS, where you have the behavior of those users and the return is based on how good are you bidding. The second approach is something that people are doing, which is kind of crazy, which is bidding based on average LTVs. So you kind of find a way of measuring how much on average you generate in the US, and let's say it's $1, and you bid $1 across all of your channels, no matter what the creative is, no matter what the real performance is. And that's happening today. And there's the peanut butter approach, which I learned this term a couple of weeks ago, which is basically those that generate 10, 20% of revenue from ads they are IAP heavy. They're optimizing towards ROS using IAP, and then they spread the peanut butter evenly on top, assuming their LTV is IAP is $2. If it's 20% ads, it's going to be $2.40 or $2.50, depends on how you calculate that. And then some people give up. And there's guys like Andrew who's been dealing with this for the last couple of years that are basically trying to hack it themselves, and it's going to be great once Andrew walks us through how it looks for you guys and your team.
Yeah, so we've been, again, my company is Random Logic Games, and we've been dealing with this problem for quite a while. So a little bit about our company. We're based in a city called Birmingham, Alabama, which I must admit is a little weird, but we are currently sitting in Sandpoint, Idaho, where a mobile attribution company is, so anything's believable, I suppose. We're a really small company. We've got 13 team members, 8 of which are in Birmingham, 4 of which are here today with us, so make sure to say hello. And we have a team also in India. So we primarily build games in the word puzzle and trivia category. And if you know anything about the games in these categories, you're going to know that they rely heavily on ads to monetize. You know, from 60-40 splits all the way up to 90% ads, 10% in-app purchases. And so we skew really high with ads for these types of games. And so some notable hits of ours are Infinite Word Search and Guess the Emoji. You may have seen or played these games even. Both of those have earned well over 50 million installs each. So we've done quite well with those games. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our evolution of trying to figure out ad LTV, since ads are so extremely important for us, and like getting this right is really important for our business, and probably for a number of your businesses as well. So in our quest for the ad LTV, you know, you kind of want to define some requirements for what this tool needs to look like. And it's a little rough. So the first one being accuracy. You want to know for sure that you're attributing revenue to the correct user, that this user did an action and he is worth X amount of dollars. Unfortunately, this is it's impossible. The ad networks will not pass this type of data to you. They won't say that user XYZ generated $10. It's never going to happen, with few exceptions. The next is automation. Like you can't constantly collect data from all these sources and compile them together. It's just too much to do. It's way too much to do. And then let's say you want to bid with a focus on return on ad spend, which is obviously the way you want to bid. That even adds another level of complexity as you're trying to collect accurate cost data from tons and tons of different places. Last but not least, you need the system to be simple. You need to plug everything in, and then you need to be able to train your employees on how to use it. So these are the kind of the qualifications that we started with. We're not quite there yet, but I'll show you the version 1.0 of our tool. So version 1.0 is the old spreadsheet method. So some of the inputs that you're going to need for this method is kind of here at the top left. You're going to have to put in your rewarded video CPM. We're tracking rewarded video views and interstitial views through Kochava, so we know for sure which users have triggered these views. We don't want to send 10 million events a day to Kochava with banner impressions, so what we've decided to do in the past was figure out what percentage of our revenue is made up of banners and factor that into the model as well. So put in our CPMs, factor in our banner as well. We go ahead and define some ROI goals, an ideal ROI, an acceptable ROI at 40 and 20%. And then if you're going to be running an ad-based business, you know that your organic users, just like any app business, are extremely important. So you have to assign a value to your organic users, an LTV to those guys, and understand how your paid acquisition influences your organic users. So, and do bear with me. This is tough to look at a slide with all these numbers on it, and that's on purpose. I want you to understand that this is like a very complex issue, and I want you to feel my pain a little bit, I guess. So what we try to do is we want to get our money back plus a little profit within a 90-day time frame. It's kind of our goal. So we cohort data, we grab data for a 28-day period, and we say, well, can we estimate a 90-day LTV from this data? And in order to do that, you need to define, well, how many interstitials will the cohort see on average by day 28, and also how many rewarded videos will they see by day 28? And then that lets you extrapolate out the rest of the 90 days. Last but not least, if you've ever tried to track interstitial or rewarded video impressions with events through analytics tools such as Kochava or really anyone, you're going to know that when you look at your mediation layer or you look at your ad networks, there's going to be some discrepancy there. So again, we've accounted for missing interstitials or also the possibility of there being too many interstitials tracked. So on the next screen, we have to go a little further to get, tick me on over, thank you. Okay, so now that we put in all that data, we have gotten to the point where we're going to analyze one network, one country. So let's just say this is ironSource in the US here, just as an example, and you can see we got some nice app names there. You of course need to put in your installs that happened in the period. You need to put in all the videos and interstitials that happened within the period, and then you've got to go through and put in the CPI of each of those sites during that period. And what that's going to do is first it's going to give you a 28-day return on ad spend, which is fairly accurate. And then if you go to the next slide, it's going to kick out finally what you believe to be your 90-day return on ad spend, which hopefully is positive, is higher than 100%, and you've got a little profit baked in there. And so this is kind of the best we've been able to do with spreadsheets. It's also going to give you an ideal bid and a max bid. So you kind of know that if you're bidding in between these numbers for any one of these sources, you're doing okay. You obviously want to hit the ideal bid to get your 40% ROI, but you have to kind of bid within this range usually, or you end up killing volume or getting too much volume, or it's kind of a little bit of a game you have to play there with that. So that is version 1.0 of, I guess, the tool that we built, which is really just a spreadsheet-based way to analyze, ad LTV, which got us pretty far. So the next iteration of this tool was we're doing something very similar to the spreadsheet, but now we're automating all of this stuff. And so we're pulling in all of the events from Kochava, of course, all the attribution data, and we're also pulling in all of the revenue from all of the sources that we use, melding it with also in-app purchases, bringing in cost. And this gets us to a point where we're still analyzing a ton of data. We're having to do a lot of manual work still, but at least importing the data is much easier. And so as you can see from this tool, this is a huge database full of data, and we've got this free analytics software called Metabase laid on top of it that allows us to do analysis much quicker. And so this is kind of where we are with ad LTV. It has gotten us, these tools that we've built and even the spreadsheet have gotten us quite far. But as you can see, there's like, we sort of still have a long way to go. And so I think over the next year or two, this problem is going to get solved one way or another. And I think Yevgeny is going to tell you a little bit about that. Oh, I have one more slide. So one thing that I talked about on the very first slide is that ad networks are never going to tell you that, yes, this user converted and we paid you $9.73 for him. But we are kind of moving into this programmatic era, of course, where you'll know for sure that each impression that you're getting has some value assigned to it, because each impression is going to eventually go through this auction, and you're going to at least be able to attribute a couple cents to each user and it be highly accurate in the future. So we've got that going for us. The next thing is that companies like ironSource are building tools which help solve this problem as well. And of course, they're working with Kochava to integrate this, which is going to make our life a lot easier. It's a lot less data that we have to collect. And then to come full circle with this, you want to be able to not even really look at the data if you don't have to. You want the data to immediately feed back into your user acquisition sources and just You set the return on ad spend you want, and it should, in theory, be able to kind of do its own thing and be a money printing machine, ideally. So hopefully we get to that point. ironSource is doing some really amazing stuff with return on ad spend bidding, which we're using this product. When he tells you more about his user level ad data tool that they're building, you're going to be able to do this with every single ad network, whether it's Unity, regardless of who it is. You'll at least be able to import the data through Kochava into your own BI and do this automated bidding, which will be quite wonderful. So, Yevgeny?
Thank you. So, as you probably noticed, it's not that easy. I don't know how many of you guys have tried something like this or have seen this in the past, but this takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and it's actionable but not necessarily accurate. And that data of how much each user generated exists, and it exists. The closest that you can see is basically the monetization platforms. They know which users saw which impression and how much revenue that generated. And seeing this process with Andrew and many other partners, basically in the last year and a half, we recognize that this is one of the biggest bottlenecks in growing ad-based apps. If you cannot bid properly, you're slowing down your growth. That's regardless of the platform you're buying. The idea here is that at the end of the day, any partner that integrates our technology, and in this case it's our mutual technology, we want to unlock these bottlenecks. And essentially, if we are that entity that mediates these ads, and we know for each user which ad did he touch from which segment, which placement, which instance, what was the CPM for that specific impression in that session, we can at the end of the day assign a dollar value to that device ID, just like an in-app purchase, right? And that kind of simplified approach basically allows us to make this data available over API. It's a public API where basically using your credentials, you are able to pull this either into your attribution platforms, any other third parties, your own internal BI stack, where basically you can see, and this is live for, I think, this is October, so a couple of months. Basically, you can see for that specific user what is happening. The only thing that is missing here is where did that user come from, right? So that device ID generated 4 cents, $9, whatever that is. That device ID, the data that is missing in this perspective is basically that this device ID came from this Facebook campaign using this audience, this ad set targeting this and that. And that connected with cost obviously unlocks this full ROS perspective. We already have this live internally within our user acquisition platform, where basically what we have here is Run Rabbit. It's a fake name, monetizing with our platform, right? So mediating all the demand sources. And the same app is also running user acquisition within our platform. And he's buying from these different apps, and he has these different bids in place, just like Andrew had. And basically, in this case, if you only look at in-app purchase data, you would assume that Hit the Clown is a bit better than Talking Cat in terms of ROS. But if you apply this full measurement of revenue that includes ads and IAP, in this case, I think it's day 7, that you can actually tell that the ROS for Talking Cat is higher, and you can just edit the bid and control this and scale things up where you should, and throttle things down where you want to slow down if the ROS is not good enough. And what we've learned from having this perspective of data is that there's very interesting insights around how each line item behaves. Some dimensions bring a lot of in-app purchases, some bring a lot of ad whales, a big difference between organic and paid. The way an organic user behaves with ads in your game or app is different than someone that came from a paid campaign, because he already got there through an ad, and that's something that is very significant in the data. And anyone that thinks that he only generates like 10% of ad revenue and has the peanut butter approach, you will see there that it's actually 100-0 or 80-20 or 50-50 or 0-100 in some cases. That means that actually you have visibility into the real value that you're acquiring from those channels, and you can bid with confidence. One of the ideas here was that it has to be simple. Both SDKs are running the game. Both have access to the complete picture combined, and basically having that funneled through an API simplifies the integration process. It's just a flip of a switch. You don't need to integrate pretty much anything on the developer side. And one of the critical things that we wanted to address was trust in the data, in this accuracy, because if the data doesn't make sense, it's not going to be actionable. People are not going to use it. So at the end of the day, those fractions of a cent, fractions of a dollar, all together sum up to the same number that you'll see if you log into the platform aggregated. Cool. Another thing that is interesting is how revenue is accumulated by users. So in-app purchase revenue behaves in some way, and then there's ad revenue that accumulates in a different way. It's different per app, different per source. It's natural that it will behave differently. Think about what you can do. Think about how you can segment things here. This basically allows you to build this true LTV curve, not the peanut butter approach, and based on that define the true full return on ad spend goals with confidence. This is just an example of some data, measured data and predicted LTV for an app that monetizes kind of from this source of user acquisition. It's around 55-45. Overall, it's a 70-30 IAP revenue game, and basically this allows them to bid accurately, and maybe in this case actually increasing bids and acquiring more users from this source, or the opposite, dropping bids were required. A few words actually about what Andrew mentioned around ROS optimization. So with this new capability, basically, historically what we had is an IIP ROS optimizer. So you define a day 7, 20% ROS goal, whatever that is, and the engine optimizes. Now with that data, you can optimize towards true ROS. And that capability basically was not possible because the ROS data was not complete. So you were kind of stuck with that. Like I mentioned, people were bidding the same bid across all channels. Not changing bids, not really following the trends because there's not much to look at. And with this new capability that kind of combines the Kochava attribution perspective together with the ad revenue piece, you have this complete measurement picture that you can apply these tools for. And the idea here is that this API is for all users, no matter where they were acquired from. We don't know where they were acquired from. We don't care that much as long as you keep doing the right things and growing your apps profitably. And that's what's behind this tool. Basically, this is kind of what it sounds like. You define a goal, you can adjust goals, it hits the goal, and you can kind of focus on other things. This is actually a case study that you can look up on our website with much more details. I don't want to waste your time here, but basically we also kind of A/B tested the UA team against the optimizer itself. And this is a public case study with a client that we did that kind of shows that in reality it's very hard to optimize daily all your campaigns, all of your channels, all of your creatives and all the geos you're running at, and you're kind of running behind on the things. And if you do this once a week instead of a couple times a day, then you're stuck with losing money instead of becoming profitable. Summarizing the key takeaways, and we'll have like a minute or two for questions. Basically, the idea here is within this growth loop framework, one of the key things is measurement. Measuring everything is critical. If there's a piece you're not measuring, you're flying blind, and that's tricky, especially if that's related to your monetization strategy. Once you have that covered, you need to make that data count and make it actionable, which basically in this case means connecting the dots, understanding where did that user come from, how much revenue did it generate, how much did it cost, and what are my next steps in terms of user acquisition methodologies. You can build the true return on ad spend goals, and you go deeper in order to really accelerate this loop and keep buying users where it matters and slow down where it doesn't matter. On the ad monetization side, think about how much you can learn about your user behavior. So you have some users that engage with these kind of ads, others engage more with these kind of ads. You can start optimizing the user ad journeys. You can understand based on where did that user come from. If it's an organic user and they don't behave well monetize well with interstitials, maybe I should not show interstitials. If they like rewarded videos, maybe I should focus my efforts there. Measuring impact of ads on in-app purchases. You can really see the value per user device ID, and you know that we have users that watch rewarded videos. You can A/B test that. They monetize better through IAP, or the contrary, and kind of optimize that through segmentation. Basically implementing these kind of things and having this approach, simplified approach of what do I need to measure in order to maximize profit, what do I need to measure in order to maximize LTV, what should be my next steps. This should unlock your capability to accelerate this growth loop. Thanks.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate a round of applause.